Happy Thursday, everybody. It is March 23rd. This meeting on currently active development tasks, places we might need help for Backdrop CMS. We usually start off this meeting with updates from the project management committee, but I don't think there are any updates at this time, unless anyone else has anything you want to add. We're working on some stuff. We might have updates next week. Nate, can you scroll the document down a little bit? Hey, I don't have to change windows. Okay, so next up is backdropcms.org. Since last week, we did launch the new layouts. So we took down all of the crazy custom layouts we had before, except for one, we still have one, and replaced them all with the Bootstrap grid system layouts instead. They look fantastic, and that was, I think, the craziest part of the homepage redesign. We have other issues that are now mostly unblocked, and can keep working on those. So if you guys spend some time on backdropcms.org, there's a couple of issues in the queue about things acting a little funky. I've assigned a few of them to myself to try and clean them up today. But definitely let us know if you see things that need attention. We have a bunch of other issues related to the new homepage design that we're going to be working through, including reworking the navigation, generating content on the homepage. Thank you, Gregory, for getting started on some of that already. And then just reformatting what we have to match our new designs. And so anyone who wants to jump in on any of those tasks, we are definitely open to people who want to pick up little bits of that. Issue 301 has a bunch of checkboxes at the top of the page. Some of them are nice, clean, standalone things, and some of them are a little bit more complicated. Okay, the forum site is up at forum.backdropcms.org. Since last week, I asked for help testing. It looks like we have a bug in Bakery where if you're already logged into backdropcms.org and you attempt to log in on the forum site, it won't let you. Thank you, Gregory, for tracking down that issue. And there's an issue in the Drupal queue. It looks like we have the code, but for some reason not working the way it's supposed to. So we'll figure out what the problem is in the Backdrop version and try and get that sorted. And I think once we get that login figured out, this is going to be ready for people to use. And so I don't really know what we're going to do about moving issues that are currently in the backdropcms.org or Backdrop CMS issue queue over there, but I would say let's keep our ears out for what's going on in the issue queue. If you see anything that looks like it should be a forum discussion instead, let's start using that ourselves to make sure that the process of adding comments and filtering by latest respond by, like, see what that process is like, and if we need to reprioritize any of our kind of phase 2 issues to make the forum more useful, we should get those on our radar too. So like if we want to say, okay, well now we have a forum, I really wish it would email me when somebody mentioned me in a comment. That's the kind of thing we need to get set up so that people will keep coming back. So things like that, just try and get that moving forward. Translation server, I think we wanted to wait for Olaf to talk about the translation server, but we have one at localized at backdropcms.org. We just need to figure out how to get translations into it. Let's postpone the majority of this conversation until Olaf is here. He said he was going to join at the end of this meeting. So if he's here while the broadcast is on, we'll do it then. If not, we'll wait and do it after we end the recording. Next on the agenda is Backdrop CMS, the project itself. And Nate, I don't know if you want to check in on that.
Sure, I'll be the talking agenda over here. Let's see. We haven't gotten that link yet for the revamped status report page, but the other items that we have in here.
It's 485. It's in the. Okay. I can.
Yes, that would be great. Okay, so for status reports on Backdrop CMS, the product. As far as bug fix releases go, 1.6.4 is our next bug fix release, and there's no current outstanding issues that would actually require us to make an immediate release. So we'll just continue accruing bug fixes and committing as those issues get fixed, as those PRs are ready. And you can find all of the issues slated for 1.6.4 by finding the GitHub milestone in GitHub. I'm going to move this UX status report. Oh, you think that this could be a 1.6.4 or a bug fix release item, Jen? I was thinking that this is a 1.7 thing.
Yeah, that's fine. I probably put it in the wrong place.
Yeah, for something that is that big of a revamp, probably would be better off as a feature for the next mining release. So there's 3 issues that that we bring up every week to talk about that are basically amazing features that would be fantastic for 1.7. And those 3 issues are these page element blocks, the ability to place things like the page title and tabs as blocks to move them around in the layouts. That's issue 1704. But there's no additional updates on that issue. It still needs review. Let's see, there's layout relationships, which is issue 2134. Also in a state that basically just needs some review. That would add the ability for us to use things like fields off of the author of a node if you were on the a layout that had a node page on it. So it'd be an immensely powerful addition into the layout system. And lastly, reference module. Reference module lives in its own contrib issue queue at this moment. It's working and functional, but it needs additional testing and tests, automated tests written for it, as well as upgrade paths. And that's a sticky problem to solve. And if we're going to complete it by May 15th, which is seeming like it's getting, not seeming, it is getting closer all the time, but now it seems like it's, you know, getting to be kind of around the corner again. So we need some focus on the reference module and to make some headway on the upgrade path as well as testing. Mike, do you have something that you want to add?
This is Jen. I'm not sure if someone else had something they wanted to add. But I was just going to say that I'm not sure we need to put any pressure on reference module. I think it's in a state in Contrib where it can continue to live and breathe and grow as needed. And when it is ready, we can put it in, but that doesn't have to be 1.7.
Yeah, and have some time now. I'm going to try to get back to working on it so we can get it in a better state.
Okay. And this item that came up before the phone call, there's another issue that has come up recently, a redesign of the status report, which is issue 485. Which Gregory has done some design work on, which I've heard is amazing, although I haven't had an opportunity to look at it yet. And so if you want to post some feedback on the UI that has been posted there in issue 485, that issue is soliciting feedback. And everybody loves commenting on designs, right? So we should get lots of feedback there. Okay. That's all I have for the 1.7 release. We have a bunch of other items, of course, as always, that that we're working on for the next minor release, and you can find a list of those in the 1.7 milestone. And of course, any features that are completed before the next release that do not affect compatibility, we're always looking to make any kind of feature improvements to Backdrop. And so, if you feel compelled to push forward any other item that's not in this agenda, then that is just as acceptable for us to be putting into the next mini release. Okay, that's all there is for the product update. Looks like we move next into general discussion and open Q&A. Looks like we have a question posted here. Jen, do you want to start it off?
Sure. So this is something that Gregory brought up in the issue queue recently too. I don't know if you want to weigh in a little bit on what you really like about experimental modules in Drupal 8 and see if we should consider doing the same sort of thing in Backdrop.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned that maybe months ago now. but this was sort of like a hint on the reference module, like things that are we are planning to get into core, perhaps for ease of feedback and people who want to test it, perhaps just get them as experimental features in core, by default disabled, and work on. This would allow us at the same time to work on core rather than contribute, the code.
So one concern I have about that is that things tend to move faster in contrib just because we don't have the same kind of restrictions we do in core. And I'm worried that if we put something in core, we might be slower to get it the way we want it, but then also slower to be able to change it. Like getting something out is much harder once it's in, because now you have sites that are using it. Even if they're labeled experimental, I think there's like a kind of a psychological barrier to making crazy changes. But that said, like, we are also not in the same place as Drupal is with the speed at which things are happening in contrib. Like, things are happening pretty fast in contrib, especially over the last few weeks. But it's not quite as drastically different as the speed between core and contrib. So I have reservations about it, but I'm not against the idea entirely. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on experimental modules, conceptually, technically. I think it's something we should keep talking about, especially if we look at how they're working in Drupal 8 and think that it's successful. We should definitely learn from what they do that works. And if there's a way that we can get that to work for us too, that's good. An experimental build.
I would worry that having experimental modules would be scary to newcomers. I mean, we want Backdrop to be friendlier than Drupal. We want to be more in like the WordPress direction, the accessible, easy things. When you're already kind of overwhelmed in a new thing, seeing like an extra level of overwhelmingness, that would be my worry about that. That it's putting scary-looking expert controls within the reach of beginners.
That is true. We are after a little bit of a different audience than Drupal 8, and it could be that having things in there that look scary and only use this if you're a developer could have a negative impact on our community, where that might not be the same in Drupal. Gore also brought up in chat, like, what if we had an experimental build? Like, if we had a branch where things were committed, where people could use the branch. That's definitely more like putting the developer tool in front of a developer rather than putting the developer tool in front of an end user. But that also means we'll get a lot fewer people using the experimental things, which makes the experiment less effective. So I think there is a trade-off there.
I mean, it self-segregates, like Canary and Chrome. The people who are developing Chrome stuff get fresh builds every night, and they're okay with that. But that's not for grandma.
I mean, I also think like we kind of already have this process in place where if you want a module that's safe, you get it from backdropcms.org, or you use the built-in installer, and you want a module that's experimental, you can get it from GitHub. Maybe there's no official release yet. We kind of already have that, that process. We could do the same thing for core too, where if we had some dev version or dev release that you could get from GitHub that wasn't available through the primary website, that might be a good way to manage it. I don't know from a technical perspective what that's going to do to managing the code. Like, if managing the code becomes more complicated, there's more branches you have to merge bug fixes into, or if there aren't going to be, if we use references for example, references on the dev branch, is it going to affect anything else if there's just an extra module there? Probably not. Don't know. I do think it's good to have this discussion. I think we should keep having it. Nate, do you have any thoughts? Or anyone?
In all fairness, Drupal 8 doesn't have project installer. Like, if that was the reason why they got the modules there for easing the process of beta testers and UX testers, we have project installer, and it's quite easier to just get these modules.
Yeah, I don't have any strong thoughts about adding experimental modules. I do think in the specific case of reference module, that our desire is to move forward the reference module, you know, as quickly as possible. And I don't think that an experimental module is perhaps the best way to achieve that because of the costs that are you know, the impact that it would have potentially on our users regarding like confusion over whether it was ready or not, and what functionality includes and what functionality doesn't. So I think as far as putting a reference module before it's ready and labeling it as experimental, like without an upgrade path or something like that, I think that I would like to avoid taking that path.
Yeah. What brought this into my mind was a recent presentation by Acquia with regards to what was new in 8.2 and what was coming up in 8.3, and there was a short reference of the history of features getting in after the release of 8, and all the features were actually experimental modules. So it seemed to me, like watching the presentation, that maybe what they wanted to get through was that by using the experimental modules, they sped up the process of getting new features in, but that might have been not because of the experimental modules, but because of the size of the community and how many hands they have on board, and how much faster things move on, especially if it's a feature that wants to get mainstream and it has support by Acquia or, you know, funds.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. I don't think that we've had too much of it. Like most of our features, as we have proceeded forward, haven't been in the form of new modules. I mean, there have been some things. Well, I guess that maybe I should retract that, because there's things like, you know, redirect that was added, and project installer, and those are definitely like separate modules. But we've also had a lot of success like iterating on all of the existing modules that are already there, and I think that's. Yeah, we've had huge amount of success actually improving individual modules in the entire system rather than only introducing new modules or only introducing features through additional modules. And I think that's, I don't know, perhaps that's because of our approach to managing compatibility and the way that we're not really rewriting things, we're just kind of building upon them. So I like that. Experimental modules for us definitely isn't a required way for us to add new functionality, and we've already proven that through, you know, 7 releases now that have all been successful, each on their own right, even without the addition of new modules. Since Olaf got in, do I want to steer this discussion potentially to get a little update on the translation server?
Yeah. Thanks for coming, Olaf.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good, fine. I didn't have time to watch my own issues again. But yeah, and also to say on Thursday night is always his Thursday night, and it's always a problem that we have dinner with the family, and I have to take my son to bed, and so that's why it's difficult for me to join the meeting. But yeah, now I'm here, and yeah, I wrote in Gitter, let's see me again, that in my opinion there are 2 questions regarding the translation server, which works in general fine, I think. And the one question is how to get all the languages on the server, because yeah, the method to put them on the server, you do it manually, and I think we can't do that for over 100 languages. Maybe we could do that once, but then for every release we need to put them the files of the new release on the server for every language. And I think, I don't know how they do it on localized-drupal.org, but I guess because they have a big community, and so I guess for every language there's one responsible person who does that for every release. And for that person, that's not much to do. But we don't have such a big community with potential responsibles for each language. So
yeah, I think to answer that, I looked into this at one point. I think that there's some implementation on Drupal.org that automates that process. Because I've looked through the Drupal.org, because all of the Drupal.org code itself is also conveniently hosted on Drupal.org. A little bit of a Drupal.org inception there. But I'm almost certain that there's code that automates that process, that Drupal.org, when you make a release, it parses, it runs the string extractor on the latest release and then publishes that somehow. And we have that, definitely have that capability as well. Like we have the Borg project module that we host on backdropcms.org, that when we make a release, we have a packager that does a packaging process on the archive, and then does stuff with it. In our case, it just modifies the .info file. But we could also add in the string extractor as an additional step of the packager, and then somehow automatically send that information over to the language server. So the possibility is there, and I do think that would be a great effort for us to put some time into. I'm not sure. I know of those present, Gore and I have a lot of experience with setting up the backdropcms.org project module and the GitHub integration. So we would be good candidates. Why don't I take my thoughts and put them into the issue queue rather than dumping them all out here? Because this is another area. It's like, if we can get more volunteers, then we can make it so that other people can be empowered to do this work.
Okay.
What about different languages? Why do we add more languages?
So I didn't get the question.
So it was just the question you asked earlier about how do we get more than just example languages onto the translation server? And I don't know if we need to have like one person upload each language, like all of the strings that get exported from Backdrop Core are going to be in English. How do we just create the ability for people to add translations for those languages by adding a language as an option?
Yeah, I think so. If we could automate the process, which Nate said, to extract all the strings from Backdrop, we could also automatically build, or also, let's say, take the last language file. So we have, once again, we have once, I think we have to manually add all the languages. But then we can automate the rest of the process. First, extracting the strings from Backdrop, and second, to put the last used language file in the new, for example, last used Spanish language file from Backdrop 163. We use that also for 164. And we put it there automatically, and then people can improve because there are some new strings and can simply add them. It was also automatically from the module when I how was it? I don't remember exactly, but when there's already some automation. I have to look look again. Sorry that I'm not so good prepared now, but
sorry. The question
yeah.
was it the matter? The issue is with its new release of Backdrop, there are new updated strings. So you are wondering how the basic language is English, of course, and then we get a new version of the strings, and then your question is how do we get the previous version of the translated language, like Spanish, for example, and then create a new version, like the next version. Was that the question?
So I think that's a good question too. But my question is like, how do we make it? How do we get Spanish? How do we get French? How do we get German? Like, what is the process for adding that language?
We once add that language manually, I think.
Okay.
I made that with 3 languages, and I think I can also do that for 100 languages once. But then
can we
the other
automate
question
that?
is of clones. Sorry?
Can we automate that?
Well, we only need to add the language once. It's like, creating, like, I want to add a new language. And then
edit, and then I import the Drupal file.
Okay.
So to have a good starting point. And I would also then import, or it would be good to import also the Drupal file of views, of the views module, and so on. And yeah, we could do that once for every language, starting with the most important, like Spanish and so on. And then the rest is more important, I think, because for every release we can do that manually.
At some point I had thought, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's important to have all the languages there, and not only 5 or 10 important ones, because we have the link in the installer to the Drupal localization server, and if we want to change that to Backdrop, there have to be all languages.
Yeah. I was wondering if there was a way we could copy like the list of all languages from Drupal and also pull in all of the like Drupal 7 translations like in one fell swoop, just to like create a starting point, pull in all this stuff. And then if we could do that in a way that would be a good starting point for everything else, it's like, okay, you need to install Backdrop in Hungarian. You'll at least get some strings working. That would be a better starting point than starting from like, oh, we don't even have Hungarian as an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At some at some point I have given some thought how we could bring GitHub projects into play, see how its language version could be a different branch created, but that would mean creating a new top tier, sort of like we have modules, themes, and layouts, and then we have languages as well. And that gets very complicated because it's not just core that has languages, it's each contrib project that has a language or will potentially have a translation. So this gets complicated.
Yeah, but it's basically, I think it's the same. It's just more work to do, and but the translation server is software agnostic in a way. So you could also translate not Drupal, not Backdrop, but Microsoft Word there. And so we just have to pull or to get on the server the other projects. Yeah, and to maybe to organize a structure page-wise for the visitors, but it's like on Drupal. There are also you can get there the core files and also all the modules and so on. But I think having core also because in Backdrop is a lot in core is a very good starting point, and then I think we should start with that and concentrate on that. And if it's running, so let's then look how to translate modules and so on.
Yeah, I haven't actually taken a look at the localization server and how it works. So I know in theory how certain things happen, but I don't know the mechanics behind it. I have a little bit more free time in my life now, but but still there's a lot of things that have piled up. So I can't promise for this weekend, but I'll definitely, because it's something that I'm interested in as well. And I have a target language since I'm bilingual. I'll have a an incentive to sort of like get the Greek language in there. So I will get into the process at some point, and I will have more context, because now I'm just throwing ideas out there based on what I think, how I think things work. Yeah, maybe during the next meeting I will have a better idea and maybe have more proposals or thoughts.
Yeah, that's fine. So you're welcome. And if you want to write something in the issue queue, and I have another question, because I myself had difficulties to find this special issue queue a few minutes ago, and I think it's not linked on the Backdrop GitHub page. Maybe we could also link the issue queue for the forum and for the localization server somewhere, so that also other people can find it. And
I think that's because the main Backdrop GitHub sort of like organization has only Backdrop and Backdrop issues under it, and the rest of it is under Backdrop Ops. Am I correct, Jen?
Yeah. So all of our repositories that are not Backdrop itself are under the group Backdrop-Ops. And so that's where the backdropcms.org, the forum, the localized site are all under, and they should all be named with the name of the site, except for it looks like localize is just localize or localization.
Yeah,
there's a bunch of stuff in here.
Yeah, so basically there's three root, if you can call them that, GitHub main organization project. It's Backdrop, Backdrop Ops, and then Backdrop Contrib, right? And then most of the things, Backdrop Contrib is on itself doesn't have any sub branches besides the projects, and Backdrop has Backdrop itself and Backdrop issues, and then Backdrop Ops has all the
Everything
rest,
else.
the website, the forum, localization, everything's there.
Okay.
So maybe what we need is a main directory, I guess, listing Backdrop Ops, Backdrop Contrib, and Backdrop.
I don't think we can get that listing from GitHub, but we could definitely put this information on our website in a way that might be more useful to people, because right now it's like, where is the code? Oh, you have to know where the code is in order to find the code. But yeah, if we had, I don't know if that would go on like our resources page or something, where we can explain how the code is organized and where to find what.
Usually most sites have a GitHub logo somewhere.
Yeah.
And that leads, for them, it leads to a single organization or main thing, but for us, it could just lead to an index of those three things, an explanation, or a sub-index of what each one contains.
Yeah, this might need a new page in the handbook that's like, this is how we're on GitHub, and it could explain each, and then we can have a GitHub link in the header or footer or wherever we put logos that goes to this page, and then each one of those sections can lead to the place on GitHub where they are. It's a great idea.
Okay, good.
Would somebody write that in the backdropcms.org issue queue if you can find it? Just so we don't forget to add that page. Here's the org repo. And then, yeah, that should be pretty straightforward to set up. All right, so it sounds like for translation server, Gregory, you're going to do a little bit of work on that this week, and we'll check in again next week. But we also have determined that we definitely want to automate the string extraction process as part of the packager, and either Neat or Gore will take that on. We also want to try and find a way to automatically copy the last translation to the current version of Backdrop. So Backdrop 162 would be copied to 163. And that part can be automated. It would also be awesome if we could copy all of the languages and their initial translation files from the Drupal translation server over to Backdrop, so we can start with something. We don't really know how that's going to happen yet,
Yeah,
We'll figure it
I could do that manually.
Okay.
So because you have, however, to add the language in the interface once, and to do a first release. So that's
Okay.
I could do that. Yeah.
And then the only other question I don't think we've talked about is something you asked, I think, a couple weeks ago in Gitter, which was more of a conceptual question, like how are we going to organize people doing the translating of Backdrop? And I think this leads a little bit to this, like in Drupal, you have one person for each language thing. How do we handle that for us? I would love it if we could just make that translation site kind of open to anyone who can figure out how to use it. And over time, we'll probably start to get people who will emerge who will be responsible for a language or more than one language. I don't know what we're going to do until then. I don't know if anyone has any ideas on how to make it easier to facilitate people to generate and maintain the languages they need themselves. But I think a starting point, starting from Drupal 7, is all we can really guarantee. And then from then, we'll just need to try and do our best to keep them up to date.
Yeah, I think it's important to get interested, at least one interested person per language, because if not, nothing will happen, I think. Because also the concept of the roles is, and I think that makes sense, that you can suggest translations, and there's another role or permission to add that translation, really. And I think it makes sense to differentiate that process.
So we would open it, this person suggesting could be anyone, but then you need to have somebody with authority to approve those.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, so we could also write, when the translation server is more or less ready, write a blog post and write on Twitter and so on, that we are looking for people of different countries or languages to help out.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. Well, then let's work towards that. And then I don't know if we need to worry about organizing that anywhere other than on the localization server itself. Like we can use those rules to, or those roles to oh, are you interested in Spanish? Here, you're in charge of Spanish. And then that website will give them whatever permission they need there. But it might also be nice to give those people credit somewhere else too, like somewhere on backdropcms.org, like this is our translation crew. And we can figure out how to do that too. But I would love if we got people volunteering to maintain languages, giving them a little more recognition for the work they're going to be doing, supporting them.
Yeah.
And then one other thing too, guys, Gora posted an issue in the chat about a way that we might make translation or localization a little bit different in Backdrop 2. It's issue 1913 in the backdropcms.org queue. I would love more feedback on that too. I know Backdrop 2 is not coming out tomorrow, but thinking about, you know, what we are going to be doing differently in the future to make our lives easier would be good too, if anything.
I can give a quick update on that issue.
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
So the big difference is that instead of having somebody to approve translations, we can provide a little bit different mechanism when all people, when they use a specific translation or specific phrase, for example, please get translated to Russian in few different ways, which is possible. And the most used translation get the most votes. So when somebody is pulling a language, for example, Russian for their own background, he get the most voted translations for each words, most used translation for his words. But a new feature gives an ability to select different ordered by vote amount, different translations, and you can quickly select the different translations that fit your needs more in this specific way. For example, I don't know, the same word can be translated, like for example, a save button, right? And for some people, it could be one word fits better for their own website, but another word fits a little bit better for different purposes. But it's the same word because we do not have a context for translation. That's why we have to play with the different names, for example. Anyway, going back down, so you can select the different translation, which is giving it extra vote, and or you can propose your own translation, and it will get one vote. But if the more people use specific translation for their own website, the more it gets popular. Plus, anybody who is doing manual translation on their own website, they're automatically providing their own translation in our central system. This way, we actually involve more people in translation service, because any time when anybody with a different language set up backdrop and apply translations specifically for the word that does not have translation, they post it in our system and it become available for everybody else, which is completely fitting into our open source idea. Share your work. Pretty much that's it. Any questions or anybody wants to add to it? But it's generally described the technical idea behind issue 13.
It was quite difficult to follow acoustically for me. I'd suggest that you maybe add the new points to the issue, and then we can discuss it further there. Is it okay?
Well, I understand my Russian accent is not really good to listen, to hear. Well, basically, whatever I just described it, it's a part of the issue 1913. It's all this stuff has been already discussed in that topic, or at least written down, so you can go to that issue and probably it's much better English rather than my accent. Sorry for that, guys.
Okay, well, we can definitely read up on the issue and think about how to improve things in the future. Is there anything else? Anyone else has any ideas about things to add related to translation server or otherwise? Okay, well, we're about out of time, so I'm going to stop the broadcast, but if anyone else has anything you want to talk about after the broadcast, you are welcome to stay online. Thanks for coming, everyone.